Hey Browns fans, Nathan Zegura here with the wide receiver position preview edition of the 2-Minute Drill brought to you by University Hospitals. Arguably, no position group on this roster has undergone a bigger change this offseason than the wide receiver room. Gone are 3 of the top 4 pass catchers from a year ago, and in is Amari Cooper, as well as a couple of draft picks in David Bell and Mike Woods II. So Amari Cooper comes in, and he is now the clear #1 wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns. Cooper, a 4-time Pro Bowler who has 5 1,000-yard seasons under his belt, is considered to be one of the premier route runners in the NFL. Joining Cooper in the starting lineup is likely to be Donovan Peoples-Jones, the former 6th-round pick who really has had a great rookie season, built on it in year number 2, and that portends for big things in year number 3. He's got the size, he's got the big play ability, and now he will have the opportunity to really flourish. Peoples-Jones coming off of a career year with 34 catches for 597 yards, averaging 17.6 per catch and 3 touchdowns. Now for his career, he averages 18.8 yards per catch with a ridiculous 11.6 yards per target. With the role set to expand, that means he has an opportunity to become a dominant player for the Cleveland Browns. Now after Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper, things are wide open for the Browns, but keep an eye on the team's 3rd-round draft pick, David Bell, out of Purdue. He was one of the best receivers in all of college football last year, a consensus All-American. He won the Big Ten's award for the Receiver of the Year and played his best against the best competition. And that is what drew the Browns to him. You go back and you watch the Building the Browns, you watch those draft videos, and Kevin Stefanski had to have David Bell on this team. Well, he got him, and I can tell you the early returns are excellent. He catches everything. He would say he dropped 1 pass. That's right, he dropped 1 pass in the offseason. I think he fell. I don't blame him one bit. He was great in OTAs and got better as the offseason wore on, flashing big time in minicamp. Wide receiver coach Chad O'Shea telling me he is exactly what we thought he was, a tremendous route runner, somebody who knows how to get open, catches everything thrown his way, and then can make people miss in space. And speaking of Chad O'Shea, be sure to check out our Browns breakdown where I go in the film room with our wide receiver coach Chad O'Shea to take a look at David Bell. But I think he has a chance to be the team's starting slot receiver when it's all said and done this year. Providing some competition will be last year's 3rd-round pick, wide receiver Anthony Schwartz, the burner, the track star, former Gatorade Track Athlete of the Year, has that speed to really take the top off of a defense and make this offense incredibly dangerous from a vertical standpoint. Now, Schwartz last year as a rookie, he struggled. He had 69 yards on 3 catches in the opener against Kansas City, but he would finish the season last year with just 10 catches for 135 yards and 1 touchdown. Schwartz's progress this offseason is key, and he did have a good spring, and you want to see that continue. Chad O'Shea telling me he really understands the playbook, understands his role, and was able to play faster and was catching everything. We need to see that when the pads come on, because I think Schwartz is a big part of what the Browns want to do on offense, and the threat of his speed can open things up for Cooper and Peoples-Jones and David Bell. Some other receivers to keep an eye on as the Browns get ready for camp here. Jamarcus Bradley, the former undrafted free agent who's appeared in games for the Browns in both 2020 and 2021. Last year, he caught all 4 of his targets for 64 yards, and Chad O'Shea just loves the way he approaches the game. And then there's Demetric Felton. Is he a running back? Is he a receiver? He's both, and I think that versatility adds a lot of value to this roster. Last year, playing wide receiver for the Browns, Felton caught 18 of his 21 targets for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, he started early off with the running backs, but that quickly moved to the wide receiver room. He spent the majority of OTAs and minicamp with the receiver, so keep an eye on what he does there. Again, another guy who thrives on the inside, thrives with the ball in his hands in space. That brings us to another Browns rookie wide receiver, Mike Woods II. The team selected him in the 6th round out of Oklahoma. He's 6'1", over 200 pounds, a long strider who can gobble up yards quickly, get on defensive backs, and is able to make guys miss in the open field and hit some big plays. Just like we did with David Bell, you can go to the Browns breakdown, go into the film room with Chad O'Shea and see why the Browns liked Mike Woods. And I can tell you, after being injured, he made a big impression at the Browns minicamp, and Chad O'Shea is very excited to see what he can do with a full off-season of work here as we get into training camp. Now, in addition to all of those receivers I mentioned, there's also Jakeem Grant. He was brought in really to be the return man, the return specialist. Last year, Pro Bowl returner. 2 years ago, All-Pro returner. 6 return touchdowns in his career. He has a return touchdown in 4 straight seasons, so I know Mike Prefer is thrilled to have him. But let's talk about him as a receiver as well. He did that for Miami a couple years ago. Guess what? Chad O'Shea was the offensive coordinator there, now his wide receivers coach. So let's look at his numbers as a receiver over the last 2 years. In those 2 seasons, Grant has 505 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. He is speedy, he's electric in space, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns have some packages to get him involved. Rounding out the group, really trying to compete for a roster spot, or at least to stay on the practice squad, stay in the program, starts with Javon Wims. 6'4", he has unique size in our wide receiver room, and he has actually played in 33 games with 7 starts for the Chicago Bears from 2018 to 2020. And in those games, he has 28 catches for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's a veteran. But then there are some undrafted free agents in the mix, and they've all kind of made some plays that certainly would catch your attention, starting with Isaiah Weston, another 6'4" guy, but an absolute burner. Last year at Northern Iowa, he averaged 23.9 yards per catch. And so while he is very raw, he has a size and speed combination that is unique and one that could be very valuable in the coming season or in the coming years. Then there's Mike Harley Jr., an undrafted free agent out of the University of Miami. He is the all-time leading receiver in the history of the U. Think about that. Nobody who ever wore that uniform caught more passes than Mike Harley Jr. So he knows how to get open and make some plays, and Chad O'Shea already likes what he's seen from that young man. And finally, there's Travell Harris, an undrafted free agent out of Washington State. Last year, 76 catches, 814 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So again, competing to find a role on this roster. So this is a room that, like I said, a lot of change from a year ago, but a lot of opportunity for young players to step up. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz, David Bell, Demetric Felton, they all have the opportunity to really ascend this season, and you bring in a veteran who's been already a leader in that room, as I said, a 4-time Pro Bowler, and you talk about Amari Cooper. That's what you need. That's going to be the guy, and you have a lot of pieces around him who I think can help this become one of the better passing attacks in the National Football League. For the rest of our Browns position previews, be sure, as well as the Browns breakdowns, by the way, we mentioned David Bell and Mike Woods in this one, go to the Browns YouTube page, youtube.com/Browns, and for the latest news, keep it tuned to cleanbrowns.com and, of course, the Browns mobile app. This has been the Browns wide receiver position preview edition of the 2-Minute Drill, brought to you by University Hospitals.